In the years following the Second World War, stories of Europeans who helped rescue Jews from Nazi persecution throughout Europe began to emerge. People such as German industrialist Oskar Schindler, who saved over 1,200 Jews by employing them in his factories, and Raoul Wallenberg, a Swedish diplomat who issued protective passports to Jews in Hungary, were recognized for their dangerous and often life-threatening work. For a long time, however, the names of Namık Kemal Yolga and Necdet Kent remained relatively unknown, despite the fact these Turkish diplomats and their consulate staff members serving in Nazi-occupied France endeavored to save thousands of Turkish Jews from extermination in Auschwitz during the war. By 1940, nearly 10,000 Turkish Jews were living in the French state. While many were recent immigrants from Turkey, second and third generation immigrants were numerous as well, having grown up in France as the children or grandchildren of Turks who had immigrated to France during the Ottoman Empire. Others had fled during the War of Independence, out of fear of invading Greek forces in Izmir and other regions in southwest Anatolia. Some had even come during the interwar period, when the radical reforms of the Republic led Turkish Jews to perceive their future in Turkey as uncertain. While the 1923 Turkish Constitution decreed Turkish citizenship to all persons living permanently in Turkey, even if they lived outside the country for any length of time, a 1935 citizenship law required all Turkish citizens living abroad to register with the consulates where they live every 5 years. Many Turkish Jews living abroad during this let their Turkish citizenship lapse, thus creating a window of vulnerability to persecution after the Nazi occupation of Europe. Shortly after the Nazi invasion of northern France in May 1940, the French state was divided into an occupied north and an unoccupied but acquiescent Vichy regime in the south. During this time, the rapid implementation of anti-Jewish laws resulted in the confiscation of Jewish properties, the forced wearing of six-pointed stars in public, and a series of forced raffles among the Jews of Paris in which the so-called winners were arrested and sent to concentration camps on their way to Auschwitz for extermination. In the Parisian suburb of Drancy, a newly built apartment complex was turned into a concentration camp and served as a temporary facility for nearly 70,000 foreign Jews on their way to Auschwitz, of whom almost 67,000 never returned. It was in this context that Turkish diplomats stationed throughout Nazi-occupied Western Europe employed various diplomatic tactics to protect those Jews who were Turkish citizens, and even those Jewish Turks who had forsaken their Turkish citizenship for what seemed at the time the greater advantages, French or other European state citizenship.
The German persecutions of Jews in occupied France did not begin immediately following the occupation, but by the middle of 1941, protection of our fellow countrymen of Jewish origin was our most important and pressing task. Most important of all the services provided was that of certifying the Turkish citizenship of Jews who would otherwise have been subjected to the full force of the anti-Jewish laws. Many Jewish Turks had married non-Turkish spouses. Some had become French citizens, as had their children. A good number had, for all practical purposes, forgotten their Turkish heritage and had neglected to maintain their Turkish citizenship by registering. When the occupation authorities began persecuting Jews in France, the irregular Turkish citizens stormed into the consulate general, at first crowding into the chancery on the second floor, then filling the staircases, which led up from the entrance hall, with the latecomers backing onto the sidewalk along Boulevard Haussmann. Initially, I would stand on the staircase landings, later on a chair at the building entrance, giving them information about the procedures that they had to follow, and asking them to bring all the documents they could find which verified their Turkish citizenship. I remember that on a few occasions, the only documents some of them could bring were receipts for taxes paid in Ottoman times.
When Nazi Germany occupied northern France, many Jewish Turks, like others as well, fled to unoccupied Vichy France, and therefore entered the district to which our consulate was assigned. But when the Nazis occupied southern France, then things got much worse. Their first act was to load all the Jews they could capture into baggage cars and send them off to Germany. In response to complaints about this from Turkish citizens, we acted. If the status of the Turkish Jew applying to the consulate was regular, a certificate of citizenship document was immediately given to him. Even for those Jewish Turks whose status was not regular, after they filled out an application to regularize their status, they were given a document which stated that it was known they were Turkish citizens and that procedures had been started to provide them with the necessary documents. At first, the Nazis left this sort of citizen in peace, and by this method we saved many people. However, with the passage of time and with changes in the district Gestapo chiefs, the attacks by the Nazis increased. During that time, we had to go to Gestapo headquarters as many as 3 or 4 times daily in order to rescue our Jewish fellow citizens who had been arrested and detained.
Due to increased persecution of Turkish Jews in France, the Turkish ambassador to Paris made a formal inquiry to the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs, relaying the Turkish government's concern regarding anti-Jewish laws.
Turkey itself establishes no discrimination among its citizens according to race, religion, or anything else, and therefore feels unease regarding such discrimination imposed by the French government on those of its citizens who are established in France, so that the Turkish government can only reserve entirely its rights in what concerns those of the latter who are of the Jewish race.
In addition to creating citizenship documents to prevent Turkish Jews from being captured and persecuted by the Nazis, the Turkish diplomatic corps in Europe worked diligently to secure the release of Turkish Jews who had already been detained. While information regarding attacks, arrests, and deportation of Turkish Jews usually came from relatives, friends, and at times landlords or business associates, occasionally it came from the victims themselves when they were allowed to write from their places of imprisonment. As seen in the correspondence between Albert Gattegno, a Turkish Jew residing in Paris, and Namık Kemal Yolga, then vice-consul serving at the Turkish Consulate General in Paris.
Mr. Consul General, I have the honor to bring to your attention that on Tuesday, the 4th of August at 8 o'clock in the morning, 2 French inspectors came to my house and took my wife Lily Gattegno to Touré and me to Drancy. We do not know the reason for which we have been arrested. I wish you to know that having 2 children at young ages, I would appreciate it if you would do what is necessary with the competent authorities to secure our liberation. With my thanks and anticipation, please, Mr. Consul General, receive my most sincere greetings. Albert Gattegno.
In response to Albert Gattegno's letter, Namık Kemal Yolga wrote to the Embassy of Germany to secure the release of Albert and Lily Gattegno.
To the Embassy of Germany. The Consulate General of Turkey presents its compliments to the Embassy of Germany and has the honor of bringing to its attention that it has just been informed that 2 of its citizens of Jewish religion, Mr. Albert Gattegno and his wife Lily, have been arrested Tuesday morning, 4 August 1942, at their home, 49 Boulevard Gouvion Saint-Cyr, Paris. According to information obtained from the Prefecture of Police, Mr. Gattegno has been sent to the internment camp at Drancy, and Madame Lily Gattegno has been sent to the camp at Tourelle. This Consulate General would be grateful to the Embassy of Germany if it would intervene with the competent authorities to obtain the liberation of Mr. and Mrs. Gattegno if no crime has been recorded against them. The Consulate General of Turkey thanks in advance the Embassy of Germany for the trouble that it will take and takes advantage of the occasion to reiterate to it the assurances of its very high consideration.
Albert and Lily were released within weeks, only to be arrested again the following year. After repeated protests by the Turkish Consul General, the German embassy in Paris advised that it would release from concentration camps in France the Turkish citizens on whose behalf it was intervening, on the condition that these persons would immediately be repatriated to Turkey. In some cases, neither certificates of citizenship nor formal protests from the Consulate General were sufficient in securing the timely release of Turkish Jews marked for death in the East. An extraordinary intervention was required.
One evening, a Turkish Jew from Izmir named Sidi İscan, who worked at the consulate as clerk and translator, came to my house in a state of considerable excitement. He told me that the Germans had gathered up about 80 Jews and had taken them to the railroad station with the intention of loading them onto animal wagons for shipment to Germany. We took the fastest vehicle available to the St. Charles railroad station to Marseille. The scene there was unbelievable. I came to animal wagons filled with sobbing and groaning people. Within each wagon, there were as many as 80 people piled on top of one another. When the Gestapo officer in charge of the train station heard that I was there, he came to me in a very cross manner, asked me what I was looking for. With as much courtesy as I could manage to summon, I told him that these people were Turkish citizens, that their arrest had been a mistake, and that it should be remedied at once by their release. The Gestapo officer said that he was carrying out his orders, and that these people were not Turks, but just Jews. I returned to Sidi İscan and said, "Come on, let's board the train ourselves. And pushing aside the German soldier who tried to block my way, I boarded one of the wagons with Sidi Iscan beside me. The train began to move. When the train came to a stop, we came either to Arles or Nîmes. A number of German officers climbed on the car and they immediately came to my side. I received them very coldly and did not even greet them. They told me that there had been a mistake. The train had left after I had boarded. The person responsible would be punished, and as soon as I left the train, I could return to Marseille with a car that would be assigned to me. I told them that it was not a mistake, that more than 80 Turkish citizens had been loaded onto this animal wagon because they were Jews. That as a citizen of a nation as well as the representative of a government which felt that religious beliefs could not cause such treatment, there could be no question of my leaving them alone, and that was why I was here. The officer said they would correct whatever mistakes he had been made and asked if all those in the wagon were Turkish citizens. In the face of my refusal to compromise and the result of an order received by the Nazi officers, we all descended from the train. I'll never forget what followed. The people who had been saved threw their arms around our necks and shook our hands with expressions of gratitude in their eyes. After sending them all on their way to homes, without even glancing at the Mercedes-Benz which the Nazis had provided for us, Sidi Iscan and I rented an automobile which ran on wood and returned to Marseille. I have rarely experienced in my life the internal peace which I felt as I entered my bed towards morning of that day.
Over the past decade, the efforts of Namık Kemal Yolga, Necdet Kent, and other Turkish diplomats such as Selahattin Ülkümen, Consul General in Rhodes, and Behiç Erkin, Turkish ambassador to France, have been acknowledged by both the Republic of Turkey and the State of Israel.